Hey, today I'm going to show you how to set up a custom character in Unreal Engine. Now this is a beginner tutorial, I'm going to go click by click, but I'm going to assume that you know the Unreal Engine interface. If this is the first time you're opening Unreal and you don't know the interface, we actually have a video that you should probably check out first where I go over all the basics of Unreal Engine, and we actually create a nice little scene and render out a video from scratch for the absolute beginner. Check that out first if you need it. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a custom third-person character and get it running around. Now if you have your own custom character, you can still follow along with this video as long as you have a model that's rigged and it has animations. But for simplicity, I'm going to use a Mixamo-based character with Mixamo animations. So I'm going to use a custom character from ProductionCrate, and I'm going to assemble it with our new character builder tool. So this is a new tool that we're working on, and you can find it at character.productioncrate.com. So we realized that it was kind of difficult to download multiple characters from ProductionCrate and sort of kit bash them together in your favorite 3D program. So we've created this website that allows you to make your choices before even downloading the character. And then you can download the custom character with all the props and accessories and outfits that you want. If you click down here on the downloads section, you can see that you can actually download native Unreal Engine UPack files. So we'll be doing that in a few minutes here, but first let's build a character. And I'll give you a very quick tour of this interface. So I think for this, I kind of want to make like a bank robber type of guy. So I'm going to give him a black motorcycle helmet, and I'm going to give him a t-shirt with a combat vest and some jeans and casual shoes. I can imagine this guy sort of robbing a bank in a movie and then riding away on a motorcycle. Let's change the colors though. I think bank robbers should have dark colors. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to change the vest color to the tactical variant. So now he's got a black vest, and I can do the same thing here with the t-shirt. Maybe I'll try a black shirt, or if he's looking a little bit too flat and monochrome, maybe I'll go with a blue shirt. And I think I can actually add a little bit of style to his helmet by opening up the accessories color, and I'll choose the USA variant, and that'll give him sort of red lining to his helmet, which I think could look pretty cool. I could also change his shoe color, but I think I'll leave it how it is. Down here at the bottom, you can also choose from 3 different skin tone variations. Now, if you go down to the download section, if you have a pro account, you can actually go to the Unreal Engine UPack, and let's give this a good name really quick. I'll call it Male Bank Robber, and I'll click Download LOD1. And this will download an Unreal Engine file that's already assembled with all the materials hooked up properly. Now, if you don't have a pro account, you can still download an FBX file and download LOD2, which is the lowest resolution version of this character. And it will be an FBX, and you'll have to import it into Unreal Engine and manually hook up the textures, but you can still follow along even with the free account. And if you're wondering what the difference is between the low, medium, and high resolutions of this model, the one you see here in the preview on the website is the lowest resolution. So this is the free version, and if you download LOD1 or 0, it will look even better than this. Notice that the Unreal Engine version is just automatically set to LOD1. Okay, now we need some animations, and these characters are all based on the Mixamo skeleton. So we can jump over to Mixamo and download some animations. Now, quick note, you can actually just download animations straight from Mixamo and then upload them to the character tool right here in the top right corner, and it will just work. But a quick word of warning, if you're using a character from Mixamo that has very strange proportions, like this character right here with his tiny legs and his big arms and his wide shoulders, if you have this guy selected in Mixamo and then you download one of these animations while he's the active character, then the animations might look strange on the character builder site. If you choose a human character with basic proportions, it'll work just fine. But if you want to make sure it's exactly accurate to these characters, we've actually added a feature right here in the bottom right corner that says Advanced, where you can download the mannequin of the character. So this is the character's body at the highest resolution, but with no accessories and no textures. And this is free if you have a free account. So again, if you want your Mixamo animations to be as accurate to this character as possible, I recommend downloading this mannequin file and uploading that to Mixamo. With the character uploaded, now we can download the animations that we need. So I need a good idle animation for when the character's not doing anything. I kind of like this one that's called Breathing Idle, but he's swaying a little bit too much, so we can turn down the sway. And if he's breathing a little too heavily, you can also maybe turn down the breathing. It's up to you. So I'm going to press download, and I'm going to turn off with skin. I'm going to switch it to without skin because we really only need the animation. Okay, and now I need a walking animation for all 4 directions. Forward, back, left, and right. So I'm just going to type in walk, and we'll try to find a good one here. Now it's important that you turn on the checkbox that says in place. So we want the character to be walking on a treadmill. Go ahead and download that. Let's also search for walk back, and let's try to find one that's actually going a similar speed as the walk forward. This one looks pretty good. So I'll check in place and download that one as well without the skin. Let's also look for walk left. I like this one that's called left strafe walking, and also walk right, of course. Now let's search for a running animation. I like this one right here that's just called running with the blue mannequin. And I like this one because you could alter the style if you want to. So you can make it kind of goofy, whatever you want to do. And I think we're going to add a button for sprinting. So let's also download this one called fast run, make the character sprint later on. We also need one for run right, run left, and run back. Now we also need a jumping animation. For that, I'm going to look for a falling animation, and I'm going to grab this one right here called falling idle. Okay, now we're going to jump over to Unreal Engine. Now this process should work in any of the fairly recent versions of Unreal Engine, but for this video I'm going to use 5.5. So I'll launch the engine, and once this window pops up, I'm going to go to the Games tab, and we're going to create a third-person character game. I'll call this character demo, but you can call it whatever you want. And I'm going to not turn on starter content, but if you want to play around with some of the default starter materials and models, feel free to add that. Just be aware that it makes your project a lot bigger, and I'm not going to use that stuff, so I'm just going to leave it off. I'll just press create, and now we're in the engine. So if you've played around with Unreal Engine, you've probably played around with the third-person template, but just in case you haven't, I'll go ahead and press the little play button here in the top, and then click in the scene, and now we're playing a game. So obviously your mouse moves the camera, and then you use the WASD keys to run around, and you press the space bar to jump. So what we're going to do is actually hijack this default character and replace it with our model. Okay, let's go into the content browser and click on the import button, and in the downloads, find your bank robber UPack or whatever you called it, the character that you downloaded from the character tool site, and press open. So what that does is it will create a new folder over here inside the characters folder called Male Bank Robber. And if you open that up, you can see there's already a folder for materials, meshes, and textures. If I open up meshes, and then I double click on the skeletal mesh, I can see there's our bank robber character. And we can see that he actually looks better than he does on the website because we've downloaded LOD1, which is a higher resolution mesh and texture set. Now we need to import our animations. So inside of the bank robber folder, I'm going to right click and add a new folder called animations, and another new folder called blueprints that we'll use later. Let's double click in the animations folder and press import, and we're going to grab all of the animations that we just downloaded from Mixamo and press open. Now, the most important thing to do is scroll down to where it says skeleton and choose the bank robber skeleton, and then just press import. Now notice that sometimes Mixamo animations come in sideways. If that happens, just delete them, import them again, make sure you choose the skeleton again. But right here where it says offset rotation, experiment with typing 90 or negative 90 into this first channel here and see if that works. I'm going to try negative 90, and I can see that my animations come in right side up. Now we can actually double click and we'll see our character running around. Perfect. Now let's set up the logic for the character so that the game engine knows which animation to play at which time, depending on how fast your character's moving and what direction it's going. So back in the bank robber folder, I'm going to go into my blueprints folder, and let's right click and go to animation, animation blueprint, and we're going to associate it with the bank robber skeleton. And let's call this ABP for animation blueprint underscore bank robber. And let's create one more thing really quick. I'm going to right click and go animation blend space. Let's also associate that with the bank robber skeleton and name it BSP for blend space underscore bank robber. Okay, I'm going to double click on my blend space, the BSP bank robber. And this is a really cool window that lets us blend the animations together. So here at the bottom, we see this graph with a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. And right now they're both called none. What we're going to do is make the vertical axis describe the speed that he's going, and the horizontal axis is going to represent the direction that he's facing. So over here in the left where it says axis settings, I'm going to open up vertical and horizontal, and let's name the horizontal one direction and name the vertical one speed. So your character is always facing somewhere in a 360 degree circle. So the minimum and maximum value you might think should go from 0 to 360, but we want straight forward to be 0 degrees. And then as the character turns around to the right, it's positive 180 degrees. And as they turn around to the left, it's negative 180 degrees. So we want the minimum axis to be minus 180 degrees and the maximum value to be 180 degrees. Now for the speed, obviously the minimum value is 0 miles per hour. The maximum is kind of arbitrary. It just depends on the game. Off the top of my head, I think the maximum value by default is 600, but let me show you how to check that in case it ever changes in the future in like a future version of Unreal Engine. So if you ever want to know the maximum speed of the default character here, just go into your content browser scroll down to third person, and then in the blueprints folder, double click on BP third person character. And then here in the details panel, search for the word speed, and I can see that the maximum walk speed is currently 500. Oh, I thought it was 600. Okay, good thing I checked. Now you can actually change that here if you want it to be faster, but it looks like the default maximum walking speed is 500. So back in my blend space, I'm going to set the maximum value to 500. Okay, over here on the right side, we can see the list of animations that we've imported. I'm going to grab my breathing idle, and I'm going to hold down shift and snap it to the center vertical line at the very bottom. So what this means is when the character is going 0 miles per hour, this is the animation that we'll be playing. If I want my character to be running forward at maximum speed, which is 500 units per second, I'm going to grab this running animation, hold down shift and snap it here. Now we can test the blend between 0 and 500 by holding down control and just moving this little green X up the graph. And you can see it actually fades between the idle animation and the running animation. If I go to about halfway, I can see it's trying to kind of invent a walk, but it doesn't quite look right. So let's help it out by dropping in our walking animation. So now I can see if I hold down control, I can blend from idle to walk and then to the run animation like this. Now, just from experience with these animations, I know that this walking animation actually looks better at about 150 instead of 250. So I'm just going to type in 150, and that's going to be my walking speed. Okay, now if I want my character to be running at maximum speed but going to the right, I want to use my right strafe animation. So now the character will naturally blend to this animation when he's strafing to the right. And notice that I've set it here where the value is 90, so that's 90 degrees to the right. Okay, let's grab left strafe and do the same thing over here. And for running backwards, I'm actually going to snap it to 180 degrees in the positive direction and in the negative direction. So now my character can run in all 4 directions. Let's do the same thing for walking. So I'm going to grab my left strafe walk, snap it right there, and my right strafe walk, put it right here at 90 degrees, and then walking backwards is going to be on positive 180 and negative 180. Now I'm also going to select these and snap them to 150. Okay, so now I can go from standing still to walking to the left to walking backwards, and I can change speeds and walk and run in all 4 directions. Nice, let's go ahead and press save up here in the top left, close that window down. Okay, back in the bank robber folder, inside the blueprints, let's edit the animation blueprint now. And this is going to be the actual logic of which animation should play at different times during the gameplay. So here we are inside of the anim graph, and we can see that there's a node here called output pose. So try to think of this like a math equation where output pose is the answer. So we're going to kind of write an equation or a flow chart that lets the computer decide which pose to display at any time or which animation to play. Okay, so let's right click and search for something called a state machine. And right here, I'm going to click on that, and we can call this bank robber states. Let's drag and drop that into here, and let's press compile and save. Okay, let's double click on state machine, and notice what happened. We've actually gone deeper into another node graph that's nested inside of the anim graph. So this can get pretty complicated. It can be kind of hard to keep track of where you are, so just keep an eye on this top bar here, and it'll let you know which graph you're working on. So the state machine is just kind of a flowchart that says which state our character is currently in. So for example, the character could just be walking around, or maybe the character is in combat. And so we want to play a different set of animations that look like he's kind of sneaking or maybe holding a gun. Maybe there's another state where the character's swimming, and so we'll play swimming animations instead of walking animations. In this case, our character is only going to be able to be in 1 or 2 states. We're going to keep it pretty simple. So entry is the entry into the game. Basically, when the game starts, it goes from entry into a state. So click and drag and drop, and then choose add state. Let's call this one idle/walk/run. So immediately after the game starts, the character is going to enter the idle walk run state, and he'll be able to idle walk and run. Now we can double click in there, and you can see we get this output animation pose. So now let's write that equation we talked about, or that flow chart, that helps the computer decide which animation to play depending on how fast a character is going and which direction the character is facing. So for that, we need to go up here to this tab labeled Event Graph. So from this red node, we're going to click on this little white output node, which is called the execution pin, drag and drop that into empty space, and I'm going to search for cast to BP third person character. And where it says object, I'm going to drag backwards and drop right here, and I'm going to search for get player character. So what we've done just now with these 3 nodes is tell this animation blueprint to look for this capsule and see what it's doing. So what's really important to know about this character setup in Unreal Engine is this empty pill-shaped capsule is the character. The 3D model inside is just some fancy art that's attached to it. The game considers this capsule to be the character, not the 3D model of the person. So what we're gonna do is see what the character is doing, and it's gonna tell our 3D model which animation to play. So what we've done is just tell basically our model here to look at that capsule and see what it's doing. So what things do we need to figure out? We need to figure out the speed of the capsule and the direction of the capsule. So as BP third person character, I'm gonna search for a node called get velocity right here. I'm also gonna search for a node called get actor rotation. So you might think that we're done, where get velocity is speed and get actor rotation is direction, but we're not quite done yet. So in common terms, velocity means speed, but in more technical mathematical terms, velocity is your speed and the direction you're going. So velocity currently contains the speed and direction, and then rotation is the direction you're facing. We need to kind of separate these two numbers out. So here I'm going to search for a node called vector length, which is just super fancy term for speed. And also from get velocity, I'm going to pull a node out called calculate direction. And let's plug this purple node here into that purple node. Okay, so this is basically it. This is the equation. Let's just get the answer now. So I'm going to right click on the return value for vector length right here and say promote to variable. And you can see down here in the left, this field is active. Let's call this one speed. And let's do the same thing for calculate direction. I'm going to right click, say promote to variable, and we'll call this one direction. So we've actually done it. We've solved the math equation. Quick note though, before we move on, if you ever see a node here with this little execution pin on the left side, something needs to be plugged in there or this node won't do anything. You'll get errors. So generally what I like to do, and this doesn't work every time, but in this case it'll be fine. I like to scroll backwards to find the last node to the left that has an out execution pin right here and just plug it in like that. Same thing with this direction. We can just kind of string that up. Okay, let's press compile here in the top left and see if we have any errors. Looks like we're good to go. Let's press save. And let's go back to this tab for the idle walk run state. Okay, so inside this state, let's grab our blend space, the BSP bank robber from the list right here, drop it in and plug that in right there. Notice that we've created these two things previously called speed and direction inside the blend space, and we have these two variables down here in the bottom left called speed and direction. So our blend space is looking for numbers called speed and direction, and we've calculated them. So let's grab speed and drag and drop it onto speed right here. And let's grab direction and drag and drop it onto direction right here. So these two little nodes are basically this entire equation just compressed down into nodes. So I'm going to press compile and save. Okay, we only have one more step now to make the character run around in the scene. Let's go down to third person into the blueprints and once again double click on the character blueprint right here, BP third person character. And I'm going to click on the viewport. And here is our character. Remember, the capsule is the character. The little dude inside is just a piece of art. So let's change that piece of art. So I'm going to click on her. And then over here where it says skeletal mesh asset, I'm going to click this and search for the bank robber. And then up here where it says anim class, notice that there's an animation blueprint plugged in, but it's not the one that we made. So I'll click on that and I'll choose the ABP bank robber. And let's press compile and save. Now we should be able to press play and we'll see our character there, idling. And if I run forward, he'll start running. Now, if you just need a really basic character setup, this is actually good enough. This is basically as complex as the original Unreal Engine character. He just kind of runs around and faces whatever direction he's running. But remember, we downloaded those run sideways and walk sideways and run backwards and all that. And right now he's not doing it. So if you want a more complex character that can do all that stuff, let me show you how to set that up. Let's press escape and let's go back into our third person character blueprint. Over here on the left side of the screen, there's a list of the assets that are part of the character, and there's one called character movement. Let's go ahead and click on that. And then in the details panel on the right, we can scroll down until we get to the character movement rotation settings. There's two checkboxes here, one that says use controller desired rotation and one that says orient rotation to movement. Let's just switch that. I'll turn this one on and that one off. And I'll press compile and save. So now the character will stay facing whatever direction the camera is facing, even if they're running backwards. And notice it's playing those other animations now, the strafing animations, which is pretty cool. But now we see another problem. He's always running, and we have no way of slowing him down. So let me show you how to slow him down so he can do his walk animation. Let's go back into the BP third person character, and in the event graph tab, we can see basically the brains of the character. This is like controlling camera movement, character movement, jump, and all that stuff. Let's add an extra control for ourselves. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to search for whichever key I want to slow down the character. In my case, I'm going to use the right mouse button. So I'm going to search for right mouse and see it says mouse events, right mouse button. We get this red node, which is an event node. So when the user presses the right mouse button, we want to change the max walk speed of the character. So I'm going to search for a node called set max walk speed. Now, if it doesn't pop up, just uncheck this context sensitive box, and where it says set max walk speed, I'll click on that. And I want the max walk speed to be 150. Because if you remember earlier, I set my walking animations to play when the character is going 150 units per second. When the player releases the right mouse button, I want to set max walk speed back to the default 500. Now, right now, it's setting the max walk speed of something to 150 and 500, but the game doesn't necessarily know which character to do that for, because there could be multiple characters in the game. In fact, there probably should be if we want the game to be fun. So we need to tell it to set the max walk speed for the current character that we're working on. And that's pretty easy. You just grab this character movement right here and drag and drop that onto the target. And we can actually plug this into the target for both of these. So this is the character movement for the character that we're currently working inside of. So let's press compile and save. And let's test this out. If I start running around, he's going max speed, which is just 500 by default. And if I press the right mouse button, he slows down, and now it's playing the walking animations. Now, a really quick side note, my character's feet look like they're sticking to the ground pretty well, but depending on the animations that you picked when you were working with Mixamo, it might look like your character is kind of slipping and sliding or ice skating. So a couple things you can do to fix that. If the character looks like they should be walking a lot faster and their feet are just sliding, you can just change the walk speed of the character. So you don't have to use these numbers of 150 that I'm using. Another thing you can do if it's just slightly off is speed up or slow down the animation itself just ever so slightly. So here's how we do that if you need to do it. Go to the Mail Bank Robber folder, into the animations, and double click on the animation that is wrong. So let's say my right strafe walk was slightly too slow. Right here on the left side, you can change the rate scale from 1 to maybe 1.2, and the animation will play just a little bit faster. Although if you go too fast, like maybe if you type in 2, it won't really look realistic anymore. Only make fine adjustments this way. In my case, I think the animation looked okay, so I'm going to set it back to 1. Okay, so I got my character running, and if I right click, my character walks. But if you remember, we also downloaded a sprinting animation where you can run really fast. So let's create a button that will make the character run even faster than its maximum speed of 500. And to do that, we're actually going to have to edit the blend space for our character. So let's go back to the Bank Robber folder, into Blueprints, and here where it says BSP Bank Robber, I'm going to open this up, and over here on the left in the vertical axis called speed, we can see the maximum value is 500. Let's make that like 800 so the character can sprint really fast. Notice that my graph got kind of compressed down because now right here is the 500 value and the top is now 800. So I'm going to grab my fast run and I'll shift snap it to 800. So now my character can be running at 500 and look like this, but if I press the sprint button, he's going to run even faster. Okay, let's save it. And now we need to create a button to make the character go that fast. So one more time, we're going to go back to the third person character, into the blueprints. And right here where we just set this up with the right mouse button, let's do another one. And I think I'm going to use the left shift key to make my character sprint. So I'll right click and search for left shift. And we can actually just copy and paste these 3 nodes here. So I just press Control D and we'll plug this in. And I'm going to set the max walk speed to 800 when left shift is pressed. And when it's released, it's going to go back down to 500. Let's press compile and save. Okay, so he's running. If I hold down the right mouse button, he walks. If I let go of the right mouse button, he starts running again. And if I hold down shift, it's going to play that other animation and he's actually going to move faster in the scene. Now we have a problem though, because you can see if I'm running to the left, he does this. But if I sprint to the left, he does this because I don't have a sprint left animation. So what we need to do is make it so the capsule rotates the direction he's running only when he's sprinting. Remember how we made it so that the capsule is always oriented the same direction as the camera? We need to turn that off when he's sprinting so that we don't get this error. That's really easy to do. Back in the blueprint, we can click on character movement, and just to remind you what setting we changed to make that happen, if you scroll down to the character movement rotation settings right here, we have these checkboxes that say use controller desired rotation, which is checked on, and orient rotation to movement, which is checked off. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to uncheck the context sensitive box, and I'm going to search for set use controller desired rotation. And I also want to search for set orient rotation to movement. So right now, use controller desired rotation is turned on and orient rotation to movement is turned off. When the character is sprinting at 800 units per second, we want that to be switched. So I'm going to have this one turned off and I'm going to have the orient rotation to movement turned on. And let's string these together. Now when the character lets go of the left shift, the sprint button, I want it to switch back to the way we currently have it. So let's duplicate these nodes here and we'll switch it back to the way we currently have it and we'll string it up from there. Now just like before, this character movement needs to be plugged into the target for all of these or else it won't work. Now we're kind of getting node spaghetti at this point, so there are lots of cool tips and tricks for how to organize your nodes, but I'm just going to show you one quick one right now. If you double click on one of these noodles, you can actually create like a little circle and you can move this and arrange the nodes in a way that's more visually easy to follow. And the cool thing about these nodes is you can actually branch off of them like this, which can be another way of arranging this in a way that is visually less confusing and less cluttered. Okay, I'm going to press compile and save. And let's test this out. I'll press play, and just like before, I can run around and the character strafes. If I right click, he walks, and if I hold down shift and move, he runs faster, but now he turns to face the direction he's running instead of the direction the camera is facing. But again, only while he's sprinting. So if he's sprinting towards the camera and I let go of the shift key, he'll turn back around to face the direction the camera is facing. Very cool. We only have one more thing left to do before this character is done, and that's to set up the jump. So if you've been following along and you accidentally hit the spacebar, you may notice that he kind of walks in midair when he jumps. That's because we haven't set the jump animation. But why is he walking? Well, technically, if you think about it, the capsule is speeding up and slowing down, and so it's blending into the walk animation. We need to tell the character to do something else when he's in the air. And for this, we need to go back into the animation blueprint. So I'm going to click on Male Bank Robber into the Blueprints folder. And then I'm going to go into ABP Bank Robber. And we need to find our state machine. And if we look up here, it looks like we named ours Bank Robber States. So I'll click on that. And this is the window I told you about where you can set up the character's different states that they can be in. And since the jumping state is basically just going to be one animation, I can actually just grab the animation from the list right here called Falling Idle and drag and drop that into the window. And we'll call this jumping. Now we want the character to be able to go from the idle walk run state into the jumping state. If I press compile though, we're going to get an error that says this path will basically never be taken because we haven't set up the rule that tells the computer when to go into the jumping state. And to do that, the computer needs to know when the character is in the air. So let's set that up really quick. Let's go to our event graph tab. And if you remember, this is where we figured out the equation for speed and direction. Let's do another one really quick. This one's going to be really easy. But basically, as BP third person character, we can click and drag out of this blue output node and search for is falling. So this little thing will tell our character when that capsule is in the air, basically. Where it says return value right here, let's right click and say promote to variable. And then down here in the bottom left, let's call this jumping with a question mark. And we'll hit compile. And we can see over here that by default, jumping is set to off, which means just by default, he's not jumping. But if the character's in the air, this will be set to on. Now it's not going to work yet because as you can see, there's this little pin on the left side, which means it needs to be plugged into something. So I'm just going to plug it into right here. Okay, let's compile and we'll go back to the bank robber states. And now we can set up the rule that says when the character is allowed to move from the idle walk run state into the jumping state. And this little circle right here is the rule. So let's click on that. And notice down here in the bottom left, we now have this variable called jumping. Let's drag and drop this into our graph. I'm going to say get jumping. And let's drag off and search for a node called equal and plug it in here. Okay, so if jumping is true, that's what this little checkbox means. Let's turn that on. Then it can enter the jumping state. Let's go ahead and press compile and save, and we can test it out. So I can still run around, I can sprint, and if I hit spacebar, it's going to play the jumping animation. But notice it doesn't go back to the walking state because we never set up a rule that says it's allowed to go back to the walking state. So let's fix that. Back in the animation blueprint, inside of our state machine, we need to also drag and drop an arrow from jumping back towards the idle walk run state. And then we'll double click on the little rule and let's go down here and get jumping again. We'll search for equal and plug that in. So now if jumping is equal to not true, which is the empty checkbox, then it can go back into the idle walk run state. So let's press compile, save, and do our final test. So I'm running around, I'm walking, I'm sprinting, and if I jump, he plays the animation and he goes back into the walk state. Cool, so now we have a character who's able to walk around our game level. He can't really do much else, can't really do any attack animations. We have another video on the channel for melee attack animations, like with a sword, so if you want your character to be able to do that, go check that video out in the description. It picks up right where this video left off. But that video uses our medieval skeletal warriors, and this is a more modern character. So I feel like a gun would be more appropriate for him, maybe especially because he has magazines on his chest. So if you want to learn how to make a character who can do shooting animations, be sure to leave a comment down below, and we'll definitely get to that if enough of you are interested. Now really quick, I want to show you how easy it is to set up another character almost instantaneously once you've set up one character. Let's say you want to be able to change the character's outfit. So if we jump back over to the character tool, just make some changes to the character. Whatever changes you want are fine. Let's give him sort of a flashier outfit and maybe also a flashier helmet. Go to downloads. Let's rename this Male Cyberpunk and download another UPack. And once that finishes downloading, jump back over to Unreal Engine. In the content browser, click on the import button again and import the new character that you just downloaded. Notice that it will create a new folder inside of characters for Male Cyberpunk, and it's already set up for you just like before. You got your meshes, your materials, and your textures. But if we go into our bank robber folder, into the animations, we can highlight all of our animations, right click on them, go to retarget animations, and now this window pops up where you can transfer the animations from one skeleton to another as long as they share exactly the same joint hierarchy. So where it says target skeletal mesh, I'll choose the cyberpunk character, and I'm going to highlight all of the assets in the list, including the blend space and the animation blueprint, and I'll say export animations, and we'll just drop it into the cyberpunk character folder, and I'll press export. And now if you look in your cyberpunk folder, you've got a bunch of animations that are assigned to the cyberpunk character. Notice it also created the animation blueprint and the blend space, so we don't have to do all that work again. It's probably a good idea though to rename these. So instead of ABP Bank Robber, I'll just change it to ABP Cyberpunk. Same thing with the blend space, BSP Cyberpunk. And now if we want to run around as this character in the scene, we just go to the third person blueprints folder, into the blueprint, go into the viewport, and let's just switch out the art like we did before. I'll click on this guy, I'll switch to the cyberpunk model, and here where it says anim class, I'm going to switch from ABP Bank Robber to ABP Cyberpunk. We'll press compile and save, and that's all it takes to switch a character on the fly to a different costume or even a totally different character. Because we do have female characters here, we have knight characters, and we even have these spooky skeleton warriors. And they're all based on the exact same skeleton. And so you can set up the character one time and then have infinite instant variations. So if you've been wanting to try out custom characters in Unreal Engine and it seemed too scary, hopefully this video shows you that it's actually not that difficult. If you make anything cool with the character tool in Unreal Engine or in any other program, be sure to tag us on Instagram with it or post it to our Discord. We definitely want to see that. And if there's anything else you want to learn about characters in Unreal Engine, just leave a comment down below. All right, later creators.